Welcome back, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. I tried to convince Cherno to introduce our keynote speaker, but in a gesture to African formality, he said the boss has to introduce him. So, and I certainly respect that wish because the keynote address, we have two keynote addresses at this conference. And keynote addresses, as you know, are given by people who have a unique perspective, capacity, experience, wisdom on the topics that we're dealing with in the conference. And so Sadibou Marong certainly brings those qualities to the keynote address. He's a journalist by training, as he should be, given that he's leading this organization. He started his career in the late 90s as a journalist and editor, a deputy editor, and the deputy editor-in-chief for Le Soleil, a Senegal state-owned newspaper, as well as being a stringer in Senegal for the Associated Press, which maybe should be proud that it's banned from the Oval Office now, I'm not sure. And then Bloomberg. By the way, when I have students do papers now, they'll often come up to the front of the class with their phones, and I'm always like, really? Here I am doing it now. So he then worked for the United Nations before joining the Africa Regional Office of the International Federation of Journalists as program officer. As media manager, he has extensively developed a media and communications profile for Amnesty International in West and Central Africa through the production and the pitching of several communication outputs and the management of media relations. He's a regular contributor, rapporteur, or moderator of the Africa Media Barometer, a project led by Fez Media Africa. He's currently leading Reporters Without Borders, or Reporters Sans Frontières, work in all of Africa in connection with a network of correspondents to promote press freedom through advocacy, publications, and missions with local authorities, international organizations, and media stakeholders. So please help me. I think all of you know him well, but please help me welcome Sadibou as our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Professor Smith. I'm very, very happy to be in front of you this afternoon, in front of people I know. And I would like also, on behalf of my organization, Reporters Sans Frontières, which is a kind of the twin brother or twin sister of CPJ here in America. And to thanks Watson, thanks General, also Professor Smith, and also to be here and share some of our perspective. And I am also really convinced that what I will be sharing in the next few minutes will be also completing what has already been shared by Sherif, Fatou, Zubaida, William, Jano, and Alex during the panels. And I was told asked to develop something around election, media and democracy. And the thing is, I am sharing, the Africa, the map here, and you will see, for example, some yellow, you will see green, there is no green, and this reflects our WordPress Freedom Index, which will be available for later next month, in the 2nd of May. But you will have to see, for example, up to the North Sudan, very, very, very red. The situation is quite difficult. You will see also some problematic situation with some countries and countries with extraordinary difficult situation. This is how the landscape is. But what I wanted just to highlight is 2 to 3 things. Journalism during elections. It is the first thing I would like to explore. And journalism under some what we can consider as exceptional regimes, like military regimes in the Sahel, in Sudan, not South Sudan, and also the harmful role of armed groups on the free exercise of journalism. I will also finally share some recommendation. And if you talk about media and elections, something which happens from our observations as RSF is elections in Africa are high risk period for journalists. And I'm sharing the period of 2022, 2023, 2024. This morning, William was explaining the number of elections we have seen in Africa in the last 2 to 3 years. And in our World Press Freedom Index, we are monitoring press freedom, under 5 indicators. And those indicators, there is the political indicators. And then in 2023, last year, we have observed that the political indicator dropped to minus 7.6 globally, including in Africa. And that means what? From our observations and our findings, that means that political actors, they adequately fail to protect press freedom. And then they are also those who have been, undermining press freedom, at least in these last 2 years. Why we have said it? Because there are a lot of attacks against journalists during those periods we have recorded, and then we also have those attacks. They have been the erosion of media pluralism, internet shutdown. Someone was talking about internet shutdowns. And internet shutdowns, we have observed that and monitored, documented that in many countries during the election, including in Zimbabwe, in Senegal, ahead of the elections, in a bit of Madagascar, but not really. But Zimbabwe, Senegal also have been, even Gabon, in the first election in Gabon also, there's a tabula rasa of internet shutdowns. Journalists also have been facing threats and increasing restrictions. And we also have seen, for example, some foreign media have been banned from entering a country to cover. That was the case of Gabon in 2023, the first election, but not this one. And a bit of Zimbabwe also. We have seen also in some other countries how the accreditation has been tightened by the authorities so that international media won't be able to attend. This is something we have monitored and documented. We have seen how this disinformation has been also used by politicians, censorships and marginalization of opposition voices also. I would like now to share some, in terms of figures or some concrete cases of attacks against journalists as it has been documented during our monitoring. Nigeria, in 2023, we have recorded attacks against nearly 30 journalists during February and March, February elections and March governor elections. And most of those who are the perpetrators were the political actors or their supporters. This was something we documented. And we documented also the case of Madagascar. Dozens of journalists injured, Zimbabwe and Gabon also. And this guy, one is an emblematic case for us. Stanis Bujakera is his name. He is a journalist from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Stanis is very well followed journalist on social media with something like 500,000 followers on Twitter and very strong Facebook page. Also, he was most of the time, the one who is up front revealing some important news. Sometimes he reports from the US, but others he has been there. Stanis was accused ahead of the elections, but was facing some trumped-up accusations by the authorities, because what happened was the authorities were conceiving him and considering him as someone who was very close to the opposition, but someone who's shouldn't be free during all the election period. So he was arrested with some trumped up accusations, kept to jail up to after the elections, and then freed. And his case is very emblematic because I was there several times because to follow the case and also to attend and monitor his trials. But his case was very emblematic because it is the example of how journalists are targeted directly from time to time. And those journalists are very strong journalists who have, most of the time, a lot of either followers and who are also the first to publish some information and credible information. And then he did not, from the authorities' perspective, he did not have, he did not really have the place during the election period. And in a nutshell, I might say that where press freedom needs to be protected, promoted during elections, those who are supposed to do that are the authorities most of the time and political actors. And those are the very people who have been, jeopardizing press freedom during election. This is the first point. And in light of that also, we have another kind of press freedom violation issues coming from the coups in Africa. You have Sudan, the case of Sudan with 7 journalists killed, 17 professionals imprisoned or arbitrarily detained by the Rapid Support Force, not the Reporters Without Borders. Rapid Support Force. It is quite difficult. Sometimes people I have met a Sudanese strong advocate at the African Union, and I was sharing my card. He would say, RSF. Yeah, but this is not the really good name I would like to read because RSF refer to something else which is very bad in the Sudanese landscape. However, we also have the case of Guinea. I will just stop a bit. Sudan is quite deep problematic in the context. But if we take the case of Guinea, Guinea also is another country with military authorities, juntas, where what we have documented on the ground is quite difficult. For example, if you know Guinea, for so long time, it has been, a kind of middle class country with, some vibrant media. Yes, a lot of discussions during talk shows in the afternoon or sometimes in the evening with a vibrant radio landscape. But now there is none of that because of the military's decisions. There are 3 main radio stations which are independent media with, a potential of, proposing very interesting program to the Guinean in the diaspora and also inside there in terms of, offer, in terms also of discussions, so live discussion and so. But now all those radios, they have seen their licenses and on the TVs, they have seen their licenses suspended arbitrarily by the Minister of Communications. And the Minister of Communication is a civilian guy, but he has been appointed by the military, and those military are ruling the country. One of the most dramatic situation is the kidnapping of Habib Marwan Kamara. His picture is shown here, and Kamara is a very critical journalist. We have been working with him in terms of spreading some of our press releases or even collecting information or fact checking. One day in early December last year, another journalist just called to say, okay, we are missing, we haven't seen Kamara until this morning. Probably he has been, arrested. We started to investigate his case, and we realized that he has been, arrested while he was driving his car with another friend. And then up to now, no one knows where he is. And it is a very emblematic case because this is a new trend. We haven't we haven't seen for some long time in Africa. But now, in at least two countries ruled by militaries, the trend is there. I mean, people, you are just driving your car, and at the middle of the traffic, I mean, you are just stopped, and then pack. I mean, you are pulled out of the car and led to an unknown destination. Most of the time, if it is the case of the juntas in the Sahel, in Burkina Faso, for example, they will bring you to the army in terms of circumscription. But for Camara, he is not. We have some evidence that he is not in the army, but he might be kept actually into an island which is called Fotoba outside and in front of the other side of Conakry, the capital. But this needs to be dig deeper and investigated. And the other thing was military authorities. When you speak to them, they will say, no, we don't have no information. We don't have any information. We are at the same level like you, like his family, like, all those who are standing up for him. And that's impossible in a country. We don't have a country where military ruled by military, where the level of intelligence is very sharp, and someone is missing since September, and they say they can't say. I mean, we don't have information about that. And then we also have been lobbying a lot of people out there, including the diplomatic community, but sometimes even we are the one providing information to them. His case is very emblematic, and we are still very optimistic. Probably he will be released, but it's quite complicated for him. We also have if you have observed in the last years, the case of some countries, the issue of patriotic propaganda, and this is over journalism, independent journalism, the issue of expulsions of international media, instrumentalization of media regulatory bodies in the Sahel. And here, what we can consider as a takeaway in the case of Mali is how juntas, they are more and more trying to impose their proper narrative, their own narratives, in terms of how the countries are governing the countries, they are ruling the countries, and they would like people, mostly journalists, to be in accordance with how themselves they would like to narrate their situation. And unfortunately, their situations, what they are doing are extraordinary. But that mean they are doing a lot of human rights violations. And if they do human rights violations, for example, in fighting back the armed group terrorists, they don't want independent media, including those media inside the country, to cover them or to reveal or to unveil that. If you do that, you will be suspended like they did for France 24, for RFI, for BBC, for VOA. And actually in the Sahel, there is no independent international correspondent. International correspondent, for example, let's put it like someone sent by Paris directly to Ouagadougou, and other correspondent, or as a special envoy. And no, they all have gone. Some of them are in Dakar, others are trying to rely on the internal sources. This is one thing. And also the other thing was, those countries, and all those countries, even in Africa, the constitutions, there are some provisions on press freedoms. Not most of the time there's Article 4 or Article 5 and things like that. And then also there are also provision on major freedom. And most of the countries, they have set up regulatory bodies. Unfortunately, in the context of those countries ruled by militaries, regulatory bodies, which normally in a very normal world should be seen as the referee, very balanced referee between sometimes the public and the media, are very biased. In Burkina Faso, the president is now chosen directly by the captain Ibrahim Traore, who is the captain ruling the country. In Mali, the junta might give some order to the High Council for Audiovisual to suspend media. For example, they have done so recently against some bad decisions against the Joliba TV. In Guinea, that's the same. In Niger also. In Niger, they have suspended that regulatory body, and now in Niger, it's the Minister of Communication himself who is taking the decisions directly. This is quite problematic in a context where, I mean, those regulatory bodies in Africa should be, considered as a kind of the referee independent body here at the middle and trying to, to oversee the work of journalists. Unfortunately, all the decisions they are taking against media in general in the Sahelian countries are very extraordinary bad decisions. We also have the issue of imprisonment and terrorism charge and forced conscription of journalists. I would like just to stop on their enforced conscription of journalists. We have seen that in a country like Burkina Faso, and it's quite bad. Actually, from our monitoring, we have documented 6 journalists forcibly taken to the army under what the authorities, they say, a law, a kind of law, a decree, which was, voted by the Council of Transitions, for example, to mobilize any force of the country to go and fight back the armed group terrorists. But what we have observed and documented is that up to today, all those who have been, forcibly sent to the army are critical journalists. So that means, they have been really targeted. And then we have also they were 7, and we have someone who fled. Now he's in another neighboring country. We are in touch with him, but they are trying to explain the situation. And now inside the army, from what we have received in terms of confidence and some information, is that they're trying to develop a kind of training which will sensitize people on how to belong to the nation, and so that you have seen the video there is a video recently which went really viral of 3 of the journalists who were trying to say, okay, we are now here kind of supporting the military. This is quite bad. There's other threats. And then in the context of those countries, that's what we can say. There are many other problems, but let's limit ourselves to that, and also try to explore the situation of the media facing armed group. The situation of the media in front of the armed group. And at the same time, we can say something on the juntas, but the armed groups sometimes also are doing extraordinary bad things against journalism. We have the examples of the Sahel, as we have a regular campaign on Sahel as RSF. Armed group, for example, in DRC, actually, that is the latest example I would like to share, for example, from our monitoring and documentations and investigation. Also, we have seen how armed group, the M23, they have been jeopardizing press freedom in the east of DRC since the conflict has started. We have recorded over 50 attacks on journalists, and many radio stations, mostly community radio stations, have been looted. And then we have recorded displacement of journalists. Threats of some of them have been threatened. And what is news since 10 to 20 days now is there have been those journalists who resiliently try to stay there, and in Goma, for example, or Bukavu or Umvira, to work. What happened to them was, now the M23, the armed group, they have been trying to force them into some kind of training, which will be a training to even to choose the words they will be using, and a training to love more or to cover more the M23 and not to say a single word about the central power in Kinshasa. This is something new. We are still investigating, but the problems are there. And in Africa also, we have seen how anti-terror laws also have been used to violate press freedom most of the times. The counterterrorism laws, and that's the case in Cameroon, that's the case in Nigeria, and that's the case even in Senegal also. There is a counterterrorism law, which hopefully does not have any effect on on journalism. But in countries like Cameroon, journalists have been arrested and jailed under that law. And the latest example is in Sierra Leone, where recently the parliament has voted a law, and that law is quite problematic, and it means a journalist who is covering all those issues, even in terms of stories, or a journalist who has even been able to sit and interview someone who has been suspected of terrorism might be also jailed. I mean, that law is quite problematic. And we have also the issue of disinformation. It is something we have seen, and this morning we were discussing about that. How Africa's media landscape now is facing the issue of disinformation, and the risk also of misinformation during election, which is quite dangerously high. We have some examples, some cases in Senegal in last year, but now what is the trend emerging is the influence of Russian influencers, Russian backed media, Russian supported media. This is something which is even Chinese also. I mean, sometimes people they forget, but Russian, they are there to showcase their success with sometimes with some media which are really propaganda media with one way orientation. This is something which is very, 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 very real. In a nutshell, I would like to share my organization's some recommendations on which we are working, and we are also trying to lobby governments, either African Union, either ECOWAS, or either the African Commission for People on Human Rights, or government, to guarantee journalists' role as trusted intermediaries as we talk about democracy as we go. There's the issue of censorships, intimidations, and physical harm. I mean, it needs to be taken into considerations also, and journalists should be protected of that. Anti-terror laws and all these cybercrime laws also should be addressed. The problematic provisions also should be amended, because we have seen in Africa for so long times, there have been some laws in some countries which are press laws and others, but with no provision, for example, which might send a journalist to jail. But what we have seen in recent years is that, I mean, there is a dynamic of setting up a cybercrime law. If you have a press law with no provision to send a journalist in jail, okay. But now with some dictators or some difficult countries, now they have set up cybercrime law. And those cybercrime law have very, very harsh provisions which might send a journalist directly to jail. Yes, we have also the regulation bodies. I mean, this is quite crucial in Africa. And the issue here is, depending on French-speaking Africa or English-speaking Africa, these regulation bodies are more, state-related regulation. If they are in French-speaking Africa, and more or less independent if it happens to the English-speaking Africa. Yeah, the issue of the impunity for crimes against journalists also is something which is taking place. We haven't seen recently. We have seen recently some cases of decisions in favor of journalists, but in many examples, the impunity is there. Journalists are attacked, killed. They are not attacked, but they are killed. They are not also jailed. They are sent to jail directly by authorities, and then there is no way you can do to develop litigation against that. And the funding also is quite crucial in this era. There are a lot of problems in the media fraternity in Africa. A lot of problems. Most of those problems came from the funding of those media. How to create an ecosystem where media can be viable, can be reliable, can be also have inside strategy that's to go and grab funding either from the Africans themselves or from other organizations. These are things I wanted to share with you to let you know that I have also a document coming from a document which is more complete. I can share with you, and which is also which will be also available with Cherno. And thanking you and being ready if there is some question or contributions. Thank you very much.
Sadibou, are you comfortable just staying and fielding your own questions?
No problem.
Yeah.
No.
Floor is open.
Thank you so much for talking to us. I had a question about how you found, like, with independent media and with lots of the stress during periods such as like a coup or an election, how are you able to rely on international networks or like outside external journalist organizations to kind of support the work that you do and your colleagues in like other parts of the world?
Yeah, maybe we can.
So I'll ask a second question. I was thinking of the question during the first session earlier this afternoon, but I didn't get a chance to ask it because there were so many great questions. But it's relevant to your presentation as well. So I mean, I'm an anthropologist, right? And in anthropology and in academic social science, we have what I would call a troubled relationship with objectivity, even with truth, right? So in the world I inhabit and in academia, like, we're fond of showing that reality is socially constructed, that one person's version of what's going on, one person's truth or one culture's truth or one society's truth is another society's lie, or, you know. And so I guess my question is, so whereas journalism, it seems to me, is premised, even though I'm sure many journalists understand the social construction of reality, right? Journalism seems to me to be premised on some more robust or sturdy idea of objectivity or of truth, like, or maybe not. I mean, that's part of the question, right? But it seems to me that in the current moment, in this era of the internet and social media, and particularly with Donald Trump and even in the first administration, quote unquote, alternative facts and fake news, things that have become part of our vocabulary now. It's a very uncomfortable reality for someone like me who thinks part of waking up students in university is to get them to realize that their version of their world that they just take as true and real, maybe it's just their version of their world and they take it to be true and real. And when they see that others have different realities, like my take on that was always, that was a positive thing. Like, you know, in anthropology, we call it cultural relativism. The idea that, like, the world will be better if people can recognize others' realities and respect them and so on. I still want to believe that, but I feel like the current moment challenges that in some fundamental ways. And I guess my question is two-part. One is about you mentioned disinformation and fake news and so on. Does that change the ground? Does that change the foundation of thinking about press freedom. I mean, when, for example, repressive governments don't. I mean, they still do arrest people and disappear them and so on. But does social media, does the fact that people can kind of read whatever? I mean, it used to be, we used to call it propaganda, but now it's more complex than propaganda, because it's happening not just by the leader saying, put out some information that makes us look good. It's happening in all these forums that people are creating kind of on their own, but allied to repressive regimes sometimes, and so on. So, I mean, I'm winding around a very complex field of things here, but I guess my question is, how important is this new context in thinking about press freedom, the new context being social media, alternative facts, fake news, and so on. And then I guess the more academic question, which I'll pose anyway, is like, so how do you think about truth and objectivity and so on? I mean, in the end, like, is there a truth? Is there an objective world? And how can you be sure that you've got it?
Yes, and I just would like to say in relation to disinformation, fake news, and all these social media, these are crucial and real problems in the context of Africa. Yesterday, I have been trying to work on something which we just uncovered in the Democratic Republic of Congo, of voice-overs, of the voice of a journalist. And I mean, in terms of context here, it is what happens. The eastern parts, has been, caught by the armed groups. And then there is the other part, the southern part, with the capitals. I mean, it is a kind of fighting, using sometimes propaganda and disinformation. And now there is some internet and voice from an international media journalist, which has been used to broadcast a fake news which is related to the end of the war, for example, by the armed group rebel leader, and that has created a lot of that went viral on social media. And when people interviewed the journalist, he said, I mean, he really thought when he was listening, it was his voice. In fact, it was not his voice. It's intelligence, artificial intelligence used. And you will see how that can harm the reputation of a very professional and independent journalist. But that can also harm the stability of something, because even if we come back to the election democracy, we have seen in some countries also how either the oppositions or the incumbent president, they have also each created some media, and all those media have sparked a lot of disinformations, a lot of hate speech, a lot of very bad narratives. And when we put that into a balance, we will realize that if people are not trained, if the public is not trained, is not sensitized, fake news might get a country upside down. For example, I was in Senegal when in the last election, and by 8 p.m., half past 8, I mean, everyone was knew that the president, I mean, will be, we will be having a new president. I mean, the current president now, he has won the election by 8 p.m., 8:30 p.m. But in the following day, it was on 24th of March. On the 25th of March, a newspaper which was in favor of the other candidate, he was just he has a bylines and then headlines, and then congratulating the president, the candidate who lost the elections. And that was circulating, for example, on social media, on WhatsApp, and so on. So what that means if if the President Faye did not have a very wide majority, for example, it was a very tight majority, like 50.8 or 50.9 against 50, probably 0.1, that might, burn a country, for example, when people, they wake up and see that media, they are unveiling this, or they are sharing this. I mean, this is the bad things of the situation. How sometimes journalists themselves, they are caught into the fake news and disinformation campaign and propaganda. This is something which is rare. We have seen journalists themselves, and we also have seen how journalists themselves, they are put by force, by politicians or by other actors into disinformations and propaganda in terms of manipulating their sources. And so we have seen that. We also finally have seen how journalists' life and reputation have have faced a lot of risk, for example, because other external actors, they have forced them into that sphere and environment. This is also things we have seen in countries like in the Sahel, for example, in Mali or in Burkina Faso, where there are a very wide ecosystem and fabrics of fake news and propaganda, most of which are very in favor of the Russian guys, the Russian propaganda, also Russian fake news. This is something also which is taking place a lot. We also have seen journalists in relations to the social media, for example. We know, in relation to what happens internationally, for example, there are many journalists internationally, globally, who decide, for example, from now to leave Twitter, to leave X, for example, to go to Blue Sky, for example. And we have seen that movement, but in Africa, in the context of Africa, because we work a lot on those things, because in terms of monitoring the situation of journalists using social media and so in Africa, it's quite something which is not as big in terms of trend as in other world, for example, in Europe or in other countries. This is something we can witness because we have some facts and figures about that. But in any case, the issue of social media also is journalists themselves at a certain point, they have used it, X, for example, as a working tool, for example, in terms of competition. Because they need to get their work known, they need to share their work, they need also, sometimes if you have a first-hand information, you just if it's verified, you just want to share it on X or on social media. But sometimes also there have been a lot of journalists targeted via social media, sub-targeted. And they also have been facing a lot of online attacks, including women journalists, either because of their work, or because of their positions, or either because of their criticism. So something which we have seen is how, in some contexts, the authorities themselves, they have their own online army. Online army, it means they have their kind of industries and ecosystem. I am a president and I need, to defend my voices, to defend my politics on social media. I will be recruiting a lot of young people with a lot of means, and to fight back all those who are pushing our work. This is something which is happening, and we have seen it in in some countries where those who are in favor of the powers, they said, okay, if you are very critical on social media, they say, okay, tomorrow we're going to prepare a war against your account, and it will be a 72 hours war against you. And then you will see, for example, you will be targeted directly. Every time you will receive a lot of, this is something we have also monitored, and it's quite awful in terms of response by some people. The issue is very wide, but we will be having a possibility to discuss more as we go. And the thing also is about the truth and objectivity. I think from my perspective, and this will be a kind of a start of response to what she has asked. Truth and objectivity, and sometimes it depends on the landscape. I mean, in terms of doctrinal, in terms of doctrine, ethical deontology, and we all know. I mean, journalists need to stick to fact. And depending on the schools, for example, I know because I have worked a lot with Anglo-Saxons, facts, which is, I prefer facts than commentary, comment. But, our French style of doing journalism, sometimes there are a lot of possibility of commenting and so. But the thing is, it is sometimes in the context of Africa, it is bigger than all that. The issue of the ownership of the media ownerships is something which, for example, in some countries you might see the media, if the media belongs to some politicians, for example, in Nigeria, if the media belongs to some business tycoon, if the media belongs to some opposition members, you will see what the truths and what the objectives in reading the media or in listening or in reading. They have their own angles. They have their own perspective. Sometimes even in covering a story. By the end of the day, what is important to African nations and Africans, from my perspective, is that independent media sometimes is quite difficult. Something which is kind of a dream, an aim towards which people they need to go, because people they also might have their interests, but they need to be honest, and also to provide qualitative information. They also need to, in the context of our countries, where there are a lot of challenges. People they need to stay journalists and to stay themselves. Saying themselves means, to my perspective, there are a lot of, in French we would say, enjeux, or a lot of, sometimes hidden cases around. But as a journalist, they need to stick to what is the truthworthy side of the story, the qualitative side of the story, and what is the added value of the story for the public also. And finally, we have seen how, for example, there is a crisis between a kind of confidence crisis between the public himself and the media and the journalists. In some contexts, people they say, "Okay, no, I'm no longer watching the TV. I'm no longer reading the newspaper, neither the radio. I am sticking to social media, for example." Some people are developing that more and more. And that's why, if you see many media now, they also have gone into online media because of the industry, the economy is quite difficult. They also would like also to exist via social media. Many media they now have gone to social media, so that they will try to remit those people who just abandoned the fact that this is something very, very crucial. And the last thing is, the more we will be seeing pressure and from hidden interests, for example, including big advertisers, for example, this is something which is quite crucial. We will also be seeing how the media will fail sometimes to resist on some targets, on some threats, on some situations. And I believe finally that there is democracy at large is media is the cornerstone of democracy. And what we have been, it is sometimes quite difficult if you are a human rights advocate or a press freedom advocate in the context of Africa. Sometimes you might be just trying to investigate the international media or the media so as to lobby or so as to, to make public some cases, or you put out a statement. And sometimes when we, I have extensively met a lot of African leaders or African ministers or leaders. But sometimes what they say is, okay, you are kind of you have already lost your fight or your battle. When I say why, you say because those you are defending, it's not worth defending the journalists. And I say no. By principle, media is something extraordinarily good in our context in Africa. Either it's a state-run, or is it private media, or it is community radio stations using local languages. These are the cornerstone of democracy. We can't still be African nations without some media, and those media should be protected. And those who have the responsibility to protect the media are you politicians. Unfortunately, what we have seen is that you are the one jeopardizing them, using other laws, surveillance, and anything, and even pushing people to flee out of the country. Yes.
In addition to so in addition to all these issues you mentioned, covering Africa on a daily basis, every country in Africa, one of the things that before I joined the Africa Report, I didn't see that. And what is striking is balancing your story. Following the ethical line. When you talk to X, you have to talk to Y, just so people, your readers or your listeners can make the decision. But then I quickly understood that there are problematic countries. Some of them did not feature in your list, but let's say Ethiopia. I quickly understood after I joined the Africa Report that anything that is critical of the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and the Ethiopian regime is going to be complicated to cover. And the complication is not like your everyday issues of complication. What I found out is that you will have a lot of people who will give you quotations and stuff of no value, who will give you statistics of this and that. But then, is it dictatorship? Is journalists X, Z, Y, they disappeared. And so you're not going to have it. Inside Ethiopia, you're not going to have anybody who will say nothing other than positive about the prime minister and the government. But then the striking thing is outside the international think tanks, who are quick to talk about every other country, everything. You contact them, anything, and not once, not twice. I've tried Ethiopia. I've had it. I've been working on a major story about Ethiopia. I don't think it will ever happen in my lifetime, probably, because I couldn't find the people who are supposed to comment, who are supposed to complete that story. Everybody say no. You go, and then sometimes you go to the Chatham House. And no, you go to, other think tanks. No, nobody wants to talk until I was told, no, this is not, because I didn't know that. I thought, okay, it doesn't matter as long as, especially if you are not there and you're not going to, if you are covering Rwanda, it's very difficult. Yes. First of all, inside the country, you're not going to have anybody who will say nothing other than positive about President Kagame and Rwanda. But even outside, non-Rwandese international experts from think tanks and other organizations, no, they don't want to. So you end up using, maybe you have 4 or 5 people as analysts. You end up using them all the time because those are the only people who can comment on Rwanda and stuff. So those are the issues that you face as well. And then the ethical question and dilemma is 2 sides of the story. If you are only able to get one side, you tried, you gave all the opportunity to the other side, they do. What do? Do you give it up completely, or do you present that one side of the story and let the people know that the other side is not? And then this is what's happening in a lot of places where one-sided, and it's not because you want one-sided, but just because you don't have the other side to defend itself or to say anything else.
Yes. You want me to go or is fine? Okay.
Let me just add one comment following Sharif. I was just wondering, because I know that press freedom organizations recently who were looking into the counterterrorism law, for example, have had a difficulty in Sierra Leone to interview lawyers or people like that who would not comment. And this is strange in Sierra Leone with its own history of vibrancy and people having an opinion on every given issue. So what does this mean in terms of the change in climate? Because we had repressive military regimes, we went through war, but that was not a feature of the politics. So I guess I'm trying to find out how this wave of democratization elections have pushed African countries to what we call state capture, where the media itself become part and parcel, the professional organizations become part and parcel of the state as appendix to the state. And what does that mean in terms of press freedom, or what challenges does it pose for organizations like Reporters Without Borders and CPJ in their effort to defend journalists and issues of press freedom? Because you rely on local organizations like press unions to supply information. And in some cases, it's difficult when you can't get the Bar Association to comment, the local press unions to comment, not because perhaps they are afraid, but because they are subvented. Largely, we've seen subventions to press unions and all that. What does that mean for media independence and for press freedom issues?
So in Ghana, I mean, as I said this morning on the podcast, we have had a very beautiful press freedom progress from pre-colonial period to now, where we've really grown to become the where people make reference to, or the country people make reference when talking about democracy, press freedom, and all that. But I said, what happened in the last 8 years was that, just saying something to what Sheriff said and what you just said, what happened in the last 8 years was that you wouldn't have people not having the knowledge of the whatever you want to do, the story you want to do, whether it's even corruption or a normal story. But then what we witnessed was self-censorship, which is the biggest in some of our, I mean, in parts of Africa. You don't have military regime or dictatorship where you having people being picked up and all that. But because people feared the government, and this is Ghana I'm talking about, this is a democratically elected president. But in the last 8 years, that government became so unfriendly to journalists that if you wanted to keep your job, then you needed to self-censor. No one would come and threaten you, but you knew what was at stake. And so you wouldn't even have technocrats who were leading state institutions. You needed vital information from them. They won't talk, not because they didn't have it, okay, but because if they did, the next day you would be moved. What the government also used against journalists in the last regime was that they controlled the narrative. So, for instance, I live in the northern part of Ghana, and we have heads of institutions in every region. So you have maybe the regional director for the Ghana Health Service based in the northern region. But guess what? If I needed to do story on health, and then I needed to speak to the northern regional director because I'm doing it in the northern region, you go to them for interview and they tell you that they have to seek permission from the national office. Not because they were not capable, but because there was that effort to control the narrative. So it made, in the last 8 years, really made journalism very difficult for us. We were not on social media doing hashtags and all that, but maybe because, again, we knew the impact of what would have happened if we had even attempted. But that is also something that is creeping in, where media practitioners self-censor just to be safe and also to keep their jobs. And I mean, I don't know whether it's good to ask my boss this question. What are we doing together to make sure that we don't get to that point where journalists choose or media practitioners choose to just be quiet just to keep their job and to also be safe.
So I'm going to propose that Sadibou answer these last comments and then
Yes.
we adjourn to our reception.
Yeah. I mean, I think in relation to Sherry's questions and suggestions, I fully agree. I think there are some problematic countries in Africa, even in terms of access, even in terms also of what we consider as in our work, and I believe also CPG is doing the same in terms of contradictory. For example, when we send out statements, we need, if we collect the facts, check and cross-check and document it, we need to give the voice to the authorities or at least a communication minister. But most of the time, it's quite difficult. This is something we journalists with whom we work, they can witness and testimony also the fact that Ethiopia is kind of very, very close along. And the last time we went to Ethiopia, it was during another session, but not coming and going to meet directly the prime minister. And what we have been doing is in all those close countries like Ethiopia, Mozambique, Rwanda, Sao Tome and Principe, and Equatorial Guinea. Most of those countries are very close countries, or it's quite difficult, for example, to get a single word to a minister, including the communication minister. And this is something we are facing, and this is also something many of our colleagues, journalists who are working internationally like you, are also facing, because they think they don't have to scoop with either international media and international organization, and they consider you and they see you as those who are always here and to create problems, to disturb them, and so on. So it's quite difficult, the engagement. And that's also, militaries also, they do that. They always behave like that. But in terms of strategy, what we do is, let's keep on doing and going. And sometimes when it's hard, we are very aware of it's sometimes very hard. We can try to develop other strategies. For example, it might be through a diplomatic community. It might be through another minister who is open, but who is very close to you. Who too close to them, and so that you can just send out some message, and then. But it's quite difficult. It's why doing the kind of work we are doing, even covering Africa internationally, is also quite problematic, quite difficult in front of some countries, like all those you refer, like Rwanda. Rwanda, they have they also, Kagame also, they have their people, the army. I mean, response army people, and other abroad in the diaspora or internally also. Anytime you put out a statement on them, and they might be here responding, and then some of the response they say is that, okay, look, I mean, we have breakfast, we have lunch, we will have dinner, and we are happy, no problem, no war, things like that. Go to hell, things like that, and you can work on any kind of response. But unfortunately, they don't remember that. What people are trying to defend and promote is something which is very good for them. It will allow them to be able to be a citizen, and then with the same with all the necessary possibilities sometimes to say what they think. I think on the issues of censorship, I believe from what we have observing or so, there are a lot of censorship. Also, because journalists themselves, they are taking into consideration their safety. They are in Africa a lot of journalists who are working with all their dignity, the necessary dignity. But in some contexts, if they are not developing censorships, they are aware that they will be arrested and sent to jail. But if they are jailed, no one will come and international organizations will be probably putting out statements. But if you if you don't fight, they will forget you. Actually, we have 3 cases of journalists in Chad, which is another. It is more related to a Russian story, things like that. But the thing is, if you people are not trying to have some momentum to make those cases alive, the authorities themselves, they will forget them there, and even their own relatives and even their own colleagues, you'll have no win to get them out. And these are the things we are facing, and journalists also are facing. That's why sometimes in some countries they are developing censorships to protect themselves. This is something we have seen in many countries. Yes, I mean the challenge, yes, in with countries like Sierra Leone, for example, it's quite difficult. Sierra Leone, I think it has gone for having covered Sierra Leone for many years. I think the country's current situation is quite difficult and bad, and unfortunately, it hasn't reached the kind of international alert. In terms of level of alert, actually, we have seen now a country which has gone from very difficult situation with all of we have seen the war and so, and then at a certain point, a kind of apparent of stability, and now many things is going down, and even, for example, the how authorities also are trying to jeopardize the freedom of all those who are the very one who should stand up to defend the rights and the people's right, and including the free speech, including freedom of the press. Now it's quite difficult, and unfortunately, people are just considering the country as a kind of just in front of the sea, and there's everything, no war. But inside there are a lot of problems, and this is not only Sierra Leone. There are now a lot of, it's the case of Gambia also. I did not cover that, but there is a lot of problems in the Gambia with Barrow, actually, the sedition laws, and so there are some kind of countries in Africa where, for example, you think that there is kind of apparent stability, but if you go inside and you discuss with people, you will realize that their problems are there, and there are a lot of problems because of some peoples who have been elected but who pretend to be Democrats, but unfortunately they are not at that. And these are real challenges we are facing in our regions and continent. Thank you.
So help me thank Sadibou for.
Thank you very much.